There's a moment most men completely miss. She wraps her arms around you and you think, okay, that was nice. You move on. You say something, you check your phone. You go back to whatever you were doing before. And you have no idea that in those 3 to 5 seconds, she was telling you everything. Not with words, never with words. Women rarely say what they mean directly, especially when it comes to attraction. They communicate in layers, in texture, in the way a hug lingers half a second longer than it should, in where her hands land, in whether her body presses in or holds back. Most men were never taught to read any of this, and so they miss it. They miss the signal. They miss the moment. And then they wonder, months later, why she drifted, why the connection felt like it was there, and then suddenly it wasn't. Here's what I want you to understand before we go any further. This video isn't about tricks. It isn't about manipulating women or gaming attraction. If that's what you're looking for, you're in the wrong place. What this is about is emotional intelligence, reading people accurately, understanding what's actually happening beneath the surface of human behavior so that you can respond to reality, not your assumptions about it. Because the man who can read a room, read a moment, read a person, that man moves through the world differently. He doesn't second-guess himself after every interaction. He doesn't replay conversations at 2 in the morning wondering what she meant. He sees clearly. He responds with presence. And ironically, that clarity is exactly what makes him more attractive. By the end of this video, you're going to understand 3 specific psychological principles behind how women use physical contact, particularly hugs, to communicate interest, safety, and desire. You'll know what to look for, what it means, and more importantly, what kind of man naturally receives these signals. I'm also going to share something toward the end that most men in this space refuse to talk about. Something that actually changes how people physically respond to you. Not a line, not a technique, a fundamental shift in how you show up. And once you understand it, you can't unsee it. But first, let's talk about what most men get wrong. When a woman hugs a man, most men are thinking about logistics. Where do I put my hands? How long do I hold it? Is this weird? They're in their heads, performing, managing, and that nervous self-monitoring energy, she feels it immediately. That's the first mistake. Treating physical contact as something to execute rather than something to experience. The second mistake is worse. It's the overinterpretation problem. Some men read every long hug as romantic interest, every touch on the arm as a green light. They project what they want onto neutral signals and then act on that projection. She pulls back, confused, and he's left wondering what went wrong. What went wrong was that he wasn't actually paying attention. He was watching a movie he wrote in his own head. Both of these men, the anxious overthinker and the overconfident misreader, share the same root problem. They're not present. They're not actually connected to what's happening in front of them. And here's what's quietly devastating about that. Presence isn't just a nice quality. In the context of attraction, it is the quality. Everything else looks status, humor, it all gets filtered through whether or not a woman feels like you're actually here, actually tuned in, actually real. You can be objectively attractive and still feel hollow to a woman if you're not present. And you can be average in almost every conventional sense and be magnetic if you're fully, calmly, securely there. That gap is what we're going to close. Let's get into the first psychological principle. The body doesn't perform. It confesses. You've probably heard some version of the idea that body language doesn't lie. And while that's a slight oversimplification, people can and do consciously control their body language to a degree, the deeper truth holds. The body, especially in moments of genuine emotional response, leaks information that the conscious mind isn't even aware it's broadcasting. A hug is one of the most emotionally unguarded moments in human interaction. Think about it. You are choosing to close the physical distance between your body and another person's. You are making yourself physically open and temporarily vulnerable. The way someone does that, the quality, the posture, the duration is almost entirely driven by subconscious emotional response. So what does this look like in practice? Pay attention to where the tension lives in her body during a hug. When a woman hugs someone out of social obligation, the polite hug, the greeting hug, the hug that just happens because it's expected, her body holds a subtle rigidity. Her arms wrap, but they don't mold. There's a kind of deliberate, almost mechanical quality to it. The contact is there, but connection isn't. Now contrast that with a hug where genuine warmth or attraction is present. Her body softens. That's the word. Softens. The muscle tension that we all carry, especially in the shoulders, the upper back, the chest, it releases, even slightly, even briefly. She's not consciously doing this. Her nervous system is doing it for her because being close to you feels safe, feels good, feels like somewhere she actually wants to be. This is the first thing to notice, not the structure of the hug, the texture of it. Does her body yield toward you or manage you? There's a difference between a woman who puts her arms around you and a woman who comes into you. One is a gesture. The other is a choice made below the level of conscious thought. Now, before you run off and start analyzing every hug you've ever received, stop. Because here's where most men miss the point entirely. This isn't information you go looking for. It's information you notice when you're actually present. And paradoxically, the more you're in your head analyzing her, the less you'll actually feel it. The signal only comes through clearly when you're not desperately waiting for it. Which brings us to the second principle. Duration is the language of desire. We have an interesting relationship with time in human connection. We know instinctively how long something should last. A polite hug has a rhythm. A friendly hug has a rhythm. You can feel the moment where the expected duration ends, when the social contract says this is where we separate, and what happens after that moment is deeply revealing. Most people, when they hug someone they're not particularly drawn to, separate at or just before that invisible cue. They're already half pulling away before the hug technically ends, like they're completing a task. But when a woman is genuinely attracted to you, when she feels safe with you, when being physically close to you activates something in her emotionally, she doesn't rush the exit. She might not even notice the time. She lingers, and not in an obvious theatrical way. It's not like she dramatically holds on. It's subtle. It's a beat, 2 beats. The slight reluctance in how she separates, the way her hands trail off rather than lift cleanly away, that trailing is significant. When someone wants to stay in a moment but knows the moment is ending, the body resists the ending. Gently, quietly, the hands are always the last to leave because they're reaching for one more second of contact. Now here's the psychological depth beneath this. Women, far more than men, are attuned to emotional safety in their romantic attractions. This is not a stereotype. This is deeply rooted in evolutionary psychology and consistently supported by research into attachment behavior. What a woman is really measuring, often without knowing she's measuring it, is whether being close to you feels like expansion or contraction. Does your presence make her feel more herself, or does it make her feel like she needs to perform? When she lingers in a hug, what she's communicating, again, below conscious awareness, is that your presence feels good enough to stay in. That being in contact with you doesn't require management, doesn't require performance, doesn't cost her anything. She can just be there. That's rare. Most men, without realizing it, create a subtle social pressure in their interactions with women they're attracted to. There's an undertow of wanting, of needing something from her, of hoping she likes you. And women feel that undertow even when you haven't said a word. They feel it in how you hold a hug, whether it's open or whether it has an agenda. The men whose hugs women don't want to leave, they don't have an agenda. They're just there, solid, warm, no current of need pulling at her. That security is the thing that makes her stay a second longer. And then another. Let me give you something real here, because I don't want this to feel abstract. Think about a time when you were genuinely at ease with someone, a close friend, a family member, someone you trusted completely, and they hugged you. You weren't thinking about anything. You weren't performing, you were just there. That hug probably felt different from most, more whole somehow. Now here's the uncomfortable question. When was the last time you were that present with a woman you were attracted to? Because most men split into 2 modes. There's the real grounded version of themselves that shows up around people they're not trying to impress. And then there's this slightly tighter, slightly more managed version that appears the moment attraction enters the room. And women feel that split. They feel when you're fully here and when you've retreated into performance mode. They can't always name it, but they respond to it. The man who can stay grounded, who can feel attraction without being consumed by it, that man gets hugs that last a beat longer, not because he's doing anything to make it happen, because she genuinely doesn't want to leave. Now we're moving into the third principle, and this is the one that most people in this space don't talk about, because it's not really about reading her. It's about understanding what you're actually putting into the room. Her physical response to you is largely a mirror of your emotional state. This is going to sound uncomfortable at first, so stay with me. When a woman hugs you in a way that feels connected, warm, magnetic, she's not just responding to you as a person. She's responding to the emotional environment your presence creates. She's responding to how safe you feel to her nervous system. And that safety, or the absence of it, is almost entirely determined by the quality of energy you're carrying before the hug happens. Here's what I mean. If you've been in your head all evening, if you've been subtly calculating your next move, wondering if she's interested, managing your words, trying to come across a certain way by the time she hugs you, your nervous system is slightly activated, alert, on, and when a nervous system that's subtly on edge comes into contact with another nervous system, the second nervous system picks up that activation. This is not metaphor, this is co-regulation. It's one of the most fundamental mechanisms of the human nervous system. When we're in close physical proximity with another person, our bodies literally begin to synchronize. Heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, emotional state. This means that when you hug a woman, you are not just giving her a hug, you are inviting her nervous system into whatever state yours is in. If your state is anxious, activated, performance-oriented, she feels that. She doesn't know she feels it. She just knows that somehow this hug feels a little off, a little pressured, and she pulls back sooner than she might otherwise. But if your state is genuinely calm, present, grounded, open, with no agenda, she walks into that like a room with a different kind of air. Something loosens in her, something settles, and she doesn't want to leave as fast. This is why confident men who seem to do nothing get such different responses from women than men who are doing everything right on paper. They're not doing anything right. They've just stopped doing things wrong. They've stopped adding noise to the room, and in that quiet, calm presence, something opens. Now, let me be very clear about what I'm not saying here. I'm not saying perform calmness. I'm not saying fake confidence. That doesn't work because the nervous system reads authenticity directly. You cannot fake your way to a nervous state that feels safe to another person. The only way to actually create that environment is to actually be in it. So how do you get there? This is the part nobody tells you, because it's not a technique, it's a practice. You have to do the work, whatever that looks like for you, of becoming a man who is genuinely okay. Not okay in a suppressed denial kind of way. Okay in a real, grounded, secure kind of way. A man who doesn't need this particular interaction to go a particular way in order to feel whole. A man who can want something without needing it. That distinction, want without need, is everything in attraction. When you want her attention, you're present and engaged. When you need it, you're slightly desperate, slightly managed, slightly off. And women feel the difference before a single word is spoken. Let's bring all three of these together in something practical. You're with a woman you're interested in. The moment comes where you're saying goodbye, or you've reached a point where a hug is natural. Most men either freeze slightly and become mechanical, or they rush through it to avoid the awkwardness of being present in physical contact. What I want you to do instead is nothing dramatic, it's actually less. Take a breath before, not as a technique, as a genuine reset. Land back in your body, feel your feet on the ground. Let whatever you've been mentally holding just loosen for a moment. Then be there fully for however many seconds the hug lasts. No agenda, no analysis, no calculating what it means or how it's going. Just present contact. And then, this is important, let her be the one who decides when it ends. Don't rush it, don't overstay, just don't be the one already pulling away before it's over. What you'll notice over time is that when you're genuinely present, when you're in that calm, grounded state, and you're not monitoring the interaction, the hug often lasts a little longer. Her hands often trail a little, her body often softens into contact rather than managing it. You didn't make that happen, you just stopped preventing it. There's one more thing I want to address, because I know some of you are watching this and thinking, okay, but what about when I can't tell? What if she's just friendly? What if I'm reading into it? That uncertainty is real, and it's worth addressing honestly. Not every long hug means attraction. Some women are naturally warm and physical with almost everyone. Some people hug long as a personality trait, not as a signal. And yes, sometimes you genuinely can't tell from a single hug. This is where most men get into trouble. They want certainty where life doesn't offer it. They want to decode the hug and extract a definitive answer. Is she interested or not? But here's the thing. That need for certainty, that anxious search for confirmation is itself the problem. Because it puts you in a state of needing something from the interaction before the interaction has had a chance to develop. What a grounded man does instead is hold interest without attachment to outcome. He notices, he's curious, he's paying attention, but he's not building a court case from a 3-second moment. He's allowing the picture to develop over time, across multiple interactions, through accumulation of signals rather than interrogation of a single one. The hug tells you something, context tells you more, pattern tells you the truth. And the more secure you are in yourself, the less you need her to like you in order to feel okay, the easier it becomes to read clearly, because you're not distorting the signal with your own noise. Now, I want to name something that I hinted at earlier. The thing that most people in this space don't say directly. All of what we've talked about today, the softening of her body, the lingering, the co-regulation of nervous systems, all of it follows emotional understanding. But emotional understanding isn't something you can bolt onto who you are as a performance. It has to actually be who you are. The men who consistently receive clear, warm, magnetic responses from women, not all the time because no one does, but consistently, are the men who have genuinely done the internal work, who have examined their patterns, who have looked at where their anxiety around women comes from and addressed it rather than paper-mâchéing over it with strategy. Because a woman's nervous system doesn't respond to your strategy, it responds to your actual state. And your actual state is the sum of everything you've worked through or haven't. This is not a comfortable thing to sit with, but it's an honest one. If you find yourself consistently anxious, overanalyzing, misreading signals, or getting responses that feel cold when you feel like you're doing everything right, the answer probably isn't a new technique. It's deeper attention to what's happening inside you before you ever walk into the room. The philosophy underneath everything we talked about today is simple. Even though living it is harder, attraction isn't something you create in another person. It's something that emerges naturally when the right conditions exist. And you, your presence, your groundedness, your actual emotional state are the conditions. A hug that lingers doesn't happen because you held it correctly. It happens because she genuinely didn't want to leave. And she didn't want to leave because being close to you felt like something worth staying in. That's not a technique, that's who you are when you've done the work. When you've moved from a man who needs to be chosen to a man who is simply, quietly worth choosing. That shift doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with exactly what you're doing right now, paying attention, asking deeper questions, caring about the psychology behind connection rather than just the surface moves. The men who understand this don't just do better with women, they move through the world with more ease in every relationship. Because the same emotional intelligence that makes a woman feel genuinely seen is what makes everyone around you feel genuinely seen. And that quality, that real grounded attentiveness is rare. And people know it when they feel it, even when they can't name it. If this hit somewhere real for you, if something in here landed in a way that went past the surface, I genuinely appreciate you dropping a comment below, not for engagement metrics. Because the conversations that come out of this kind of content are actually interesting to me. Tell me what resonated, tell me where you're stuck, tell me what you're working through. And if you're at a point in your life where you're genuinely trying to understand yourself better, your patterns, your attachment style, how you show up in connection, there are resources in the description that I found genuinely useful. Not magic solutions, real frameworks from real psychology that take time and honesty to work through. But if you're serious about this, not just about attracting women, but about becoming someone you actually respect, they're worth your time. And if this is the first video of mine you've watched and it felt different from what you usually see in this space, subscribe. Not because of some promise about transforming your love life in 30 days, but because this is the kind of content I make consistently. Grounded, honest, psychologically real. You were already someone worth being close to before you clicked on this video. What we're doing here is just clearing away the static so that truth can actually be felt by you and by the people in your life who are paying much closer attention to how you show up than you probably realize.